Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric. I'm continuing the series, the Unported playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we're taking a look at Riding Fight, released by Taito. And Taito loved making weird, strange games that were just really fun to play, and Riding Fight is no different. Before we get too far involved though, if you do me a huge favor, go down below and hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, or else I will shoot a rocket at you. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down there as well. But if you can't tell already, Riding Fight is a beat 'em up, but it is one of the strangest beat 'em ups I've ever played because it is a vehicular beat 'em up, and this is just sprite scaling all throughout the board. If you saw my video on Night Striker, you'll know that Taito had great hardware for this sort of scaling into the foreground graphical element style, and Riding Fight is no different. But where Night Striker was kind of a shmup, Riding Fight is a straight beat 'em up, and it is just one of the weirdest, strangest games I've ever played, but I absolutely love it for its sense of humor as well as its graphical stylings. And you'll see here, there are some weapons that fly into the air, and if you can get yourself positioned underneath one of those weapons, you can grab it and power yourself up. But the minute you take a single hit from an opponent, that weapon is going to go flying. There's actually a lot of strategy is when you want to attack versus when you want to kind of back up when you see those enemies telegraphing their jumps or their attacks towards you. Although honestly, your main attack is powerful enough that the weapons are kind of just a little bit of a hidden bonus. But you'll see here in classic Taito fashion, we have the warning, and we're going up against the first boss, Reckless Crusher. And then it's going to turn into more of a traditional beat 'em up. You'll see here we just need to avoid a few different rocket blasts from his gigantic crab-looking ship, and then it just randomly blows up. We did nothing to cause it. It just must be a mechanical failure on his end. But he's going to jump down, and now we have full 3D range of motion into the screen as we fight the boss. So this is one of those games that uses that pseudo 3D effect to really great results because your character gets smaller, the enemies scale, and you really do feel like you're playing a full 3D game, even if it is just using background layers and sprites. And you'll see at the top left-hand corner there as well, we have a power meter, and that's going to be super useful because depending on how far that's powered up, we have different special attacks. And you definitely want to save those for the bosses because a fully powered up power meter can take about a quarter of a boss's life bar off in one attack that's guaranteed to hit. So there is a lot of strategy on how you kind of power your character up throughout the stage, but I love these little cutscenes as well. There's a coup in the Middle East, and they're going to stop their vacation and go and fix the Middle East problems. If only it really was that easy. But I love how the stages start as well. We're just going to pop out of our ship here, and we had a vehicular jetboard that is now turned into a rocket-powered surfboard. It's weird, it makes no sense, but it is so much fun to play and so strange and charming at the same time that I can't help but love this game. And you have these dudes in head wraps with scimitars coming out and surfing alongside of you. It's just basically a futuristic game made through the lens of the early 90s, and I absolutely can't get enough of this game. And I will say that all the beat 'em up mechanics are super sound and competent. Your impacts really feel like they hit. It's not hard at all to beat your enemies up. I know sometimes in beat 'em ups it feels like if you're not lined up perfectly, your shots just miss completely. But in Riding Fight, you'll see here that each and every one of those characters I was able to punch as they jumped out of the vehicle. Everything feels super sound as far as the mechanics are concerned. And you'll see we do get some branching paths as well. I mean, Al Rosary de Rome in this particular circumstance. But I love that there's even that train in the background. It's definitely pixelated, but it's just fun enough. And the game will give you a break once you feel like you've been going into the screen too much. Suddenly you're going to be playing a side-scrolling beat 'em up, and it's going to move in different directions. And I like that Taito was thinking consciously about what is it that you're doing, have you been doing it too much, and should you be doing something slightly different moving forward. But I just can't get enough of these Taito super scaling games. I mean, Sega's known predominantly for being the company that had the super scaler hardware, but Taito had great arcade boards, and these games look as good, if not slightly better, than what Sega was doing at the same time. And now we're fighting Colonel Abdullah, and again, we just go in and we have these giant sprites that are scaling perfectly. We jump off of our hoverboard, do a flip in the air, and now we're playing the boss fight again. And I like that most of the boss fights take place on stationary arenas versus using that hoverboard to go into the screen, because by the time you kind of feel like you've been playing it just enough and you're getting to the boss fight, it does change everything up completely. And each boss has their own individual mechanics. You'll see that I do have a fully powered up power meter right now, and in a second I'm going to use that power meter and I'm going to take off almost half of the boss's life bar, and that's where that strategy comes into play, where you really want to be saving that power meter up for the bosses because they are quite tough and you can make it a lot easier on yourself. But I will say this game has an excellent soundtrack as well. All Taito games do. So as soon as we're done with this little mini game food time, I'll let you listen to a little bit of the game. But I do like that you get these little mini stages here where you're able to get all of that food and all of those power-up drinks so we can power up our power-up bar a little more. It gives you just a little bit of a break in between the story and the gameplay to do something slightly different, and you can't really lose life in this stage either. It's just a little bonus mechanic. But you'll see here, we're going right into stage 3, so go ahead and listen to the music for about 45 seconds to a minute because Taito always had great soundtracks, and I'll be back and tell you more about why, if even though Riding Fight is weird, it is also awesome. But enjoy. It's definitely not the best soundtrack Taito ever made, just because I love the jazziness of something like Night Striker, but it's got a lot of bassy taiko drums involved in it, and I do still like it for what it is. But now moving on to another boss fight, because the first two have been stationary, now suddenly we do have that hoverboard fighting sequence, and it just changes ever so slightly, just enough so that you don't get bored with the game. And I do feel like, I've mentioned this earlier, that sometimes with beat-em-ups I feel like you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and towards the end of the game you might be getting a little bit stale feeling on the mechanics. But Riding Fight does a great job of giving you those breaks, and I love the little intercut stories as well. The two main characters wearing those Legion of Doom style shoulder pads. It's just a ton of fun. But why didn't this one get ported? It's just because of when it came out, I'm sure. There was no home hardware that could really handle this upon release, and when we got the systems like PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn, these type of games weren't what people wanted to play. They really wanted to play 3D games, so this unfortunately just never came home. But I love this aquatic stage as well, because now we have characters in full armor with axes, and we have these two characters here. They're in full armor with shoulder pads with giant spikes on them. It's just a really weird and strange look to the game. It doesn't make any sense, but it just works perfectly fine for what's going on. And don't forget, like I did here, the white icebergs hurt you, the blue and the orange ones actually have power-ups, so it doesn't really telegraph that much, but if you see something that's a slightly different color, you definitely want to hit it, because chances are you're going to be able to power yourself up with those icebergs. But definitely the most Canadian thing I've ever seen, if this game was made in Canada, which it wasn't. Battleship Boyd here is a hockey player boss. He's got his hockey stick with a blade on it. I don't know how people in Canada settle disputes, but I feel like hockey blades might be the way they do it. But I just love this game. It doesn't make any sense. It's weird, it's quirky, but the graphics are great. The scaling is amazing in it. The soundtrack is really good and dramatic. The gameplay is awesome. It's always running at a full 60 frames a second. These classic 2D arcade games that I love so much, and Taito was just always great at making them. Their development team, the in-house music team, Zuntata, they just did a great job. And I mean, Taito's still out there making games that I really feel like their heyday was in, the early to mid 90s, even maybe the late 80s. They have the Type X arcade platform now, but they don't so much make games for the arcade anymore as they make hardware for other game developers to make games with. I just miss these type of games, though. They're so much fun. They're so unique. If you've never played Riding Fight before, you definitely owe it to yourself to check it out, because it does emulate perfectly fine. But if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. You tell me, have you played Riding Fight? I'd be curious, because this is a game I don't hear get talked about very much at all anymore. And I do love that as you get later in the game, stages just go from one to the other. We're going from this ice cave system here into this entire underground city infrastructure, and we're getting towards the late stages of the game. game. But yeah, if you never played Riding Fight, definitely check it out. Do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell. We will be back next Sunday on an episode in the Unported playlist, and I'll have a video start the week as well. But if you've never played Riding Fight, go do it. It's amazing. Bye-bye.